For the last 18 years, I have spent every day thinking about how can I do a better job of connecting real estate agents with their administrative staff to help them grow teams that thrive. What you're about to watch is a conversation between my director of recruiting, Erin Meierotto, and myself. We're going to talk about our process. We're going to talk about why we stopped doing phone interviews, what JCG+T means, and how it informs how we match people. We're going to talk about some of the most strategic parts of our 5-step interview process and how we use that process to match employers and candidates. And we talk about what it takes to be successful in our interview process. So whether you are a job seeker preparing to interview for one of our roles, or you are an employer, whether you're in real estate or not, I think you will get a lot of value listening to how we design our process and how we think about matching and connecting people. And if you are looking to hire, I hope that this inspires you to reach out to talk to us about how we can help you with your hiring process. So without further ado, here is a rather long, but very insightful conversation between Erin and myself. And I've gone through and created chapters for each topic. So if you'd like to jump around or we're talking about something that isn't relevant to you, just skip ahead. Enjoy. We decided to get rid of phone interviews. And I don't think we've ever really debriefed on how that has changed our process and why we like it so much more. So, for anybody listening, we used to start with a phone interview, which is what most people do. You start with a phone interview, you go through, skills, experience. Are you in the right commute distance? Does the salary work? Like all the basics. And then you'd kind of listen for, did they seem like they have enough experience? Right. And then we would have them do a little skill test, and then we would move them on to video. And then we decided to just stop doing the first step. So do you want to kind of talk about your experience going right into the skill assessment and how that's changed our process?
Oh my gosh, I love it. I do not know why we didn't do this so much sooner. And the reason I love it is not only because we're getting better data, right? We're getting better data and we're getting better results. So I feel like not only is it more efficient for the candidates, but it's more efficient for us and it provides better results for everyone involved.
Well, I also like that we get in writing as verified, this is my commute time. Yes, I'm good with this salary range. I mean, just some of those basics, like what is your license number if the license is required? So we don't have any confusion later on when then they go talk to our client and then they say, oh no, I really want X salary. And we say, no, we verified, but now they have a different story, right? So it's very clear. Everything in our process is on video or captured in writing. And so there's just so much more transparency. And I really
Yeah,
love that.
I do too.
Yes. And we've really worked hard for years to hone in the questions that we ask. And I think I always feel like I have to put a little asterisk when I share those skill assessments with a client, because you say, I know this looks really simple. We ask them to, for example, upload a calendar invite, but there are so many little steps in having them do that. Did they make a typo in what the calendar invite is supposed to say? Did they take a photograph and upload it, or did they take a screenshot? Can they follow basic instructions? Did they get
Exactly.
it for the right day and time? I mean, it's such a silly assignment, but so many people mess it up. And I think
It's very telling.
and then I think from the candidate perspective, I think it's really helpful to understand that we are looking at the whole picture. How long did it take you to do the assignment? How thorough were your answers? Did you fully answer? Not just did you get it right, but how did you answer the question? And so your conscientiousness really shows through in these assignments, and you just can't capture that when you use a standardized test. So if we just used, multiple choice, like automated screening tool, you just don't get the same results as actually reading somebody's assignment. Every once in a while, you'll send me an assignment that you're really excited about. I mean, somebody really gave you context and really answered questions. How does that translate when you actually talk to those people on video?
Ooh, it shines through. They have a lot more confidence in their skill set. And you can tell it wasn't something that they just put little or no thought into, or maybe they utilized Chat GPT for nothing against your resources, right? But that's not the point of the process, right? So what I've noticed is that those candidates are often more excited about the role. They have more to offer and more details that they can share in the time that we spend together during our video interview. And it really makes them stand out because often we'll touch on those points that were really impressive that they completed in the skill assessment. And we'll, where did we come up with this? How did this come to be? What situation were you in that you had to go to, set extreme or so on and so forth to implement this particular concept to help drive your team forward? So it's really also a talking point. It's not just to make sure that, hey, you can answer these questions, you can do it in an error-free manner using grammar, punctuation, all of those things. We're really looking for the insight into what you're doing in your current role and why you're an asset to your current team and how you could be moving forward.
And I feel like we need to go back and explain what kind of questions we ask because we sort of jumped ahead. So for an example, a typical question might be something around the lines of, tell me about a time when you identified a process or system that was inefficient and how you improved it and what was the outcome. So that would be a short essay question that we would ask. And so we're looking for, did you actually answer the whole question? Not just this was the problem and what I did, but also what was the outcome? I mean, that piece is so key when you're interviewing. You have to tie it all together. And did you organize your thoughts in a cohesive manner? Did it take you 3 pages to write this, or were you able to concisely answer the question? All of this just gives us so much good information. And so we ask it depends on the role, maybe 3 to 5 questions, and we try to not let them be too lengthy. We're mindful of how long this could take somebody, but you get so much information from that assignment versus a 10-minute phone interview. It's just wild.
Yes, absolutely. And it's the skills that we're actually looking for. Most people can hold a conversation on the phone, right? That's a given. But when it comes to applying, the skills that you have, whether it be attention to detail, that you follow directions well, that you can take the lead, that you can communicate clearly in writing. These are, far more valuable than being able to hold a simple conversation over the phone and give us so much more to work with.
Now, the other thing that I think if you were an employer listening to this, you might think, well, I don't want to sit in front of somebody that I haven't had a conversation with. What's the ratio of people who pass the skill assessment, but then are also a good fit once they've passed the video interview? How have you seen that ratio change? So we used to do a phone interview and then they did a skill assessment and then people would show up to video and not all of them passed the video interview, right? So are you finding a better or worse ratio to people who pass the video interview?
Much more improved. There's a lot more follow through with the people that complete the assessment well and then produce an outstanding interview that really helps them land that position.
Yeah, isn't that so interesting? And I just think about all of the hours and time that we spent chasing people down to schedule phone interviews. And then you can only do 3 in an hour and you have to take notes. And then you've talked to 10 people in a day and you have to remember, what did you like about all these different people? And instead, everything's just captured in writing and they can do it in their own time. And so it's like we said, it saves them time and it saves us time. And it cuts at least 2 to 3 days off the interview cycle.
Well, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. If somebody either I found them or they applied that day and they have the time to complete that assessment that day. I have had people where I've contacted them in the morning and they've completed it in the evening. We interview the next morning. And then at the end of the day, they're being submitted to our clients for consideration and move forward in the interview process pretty rapidly within a couple of days of being presented to our client.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm so glad we got to talk about this part of the process and how we've improved it. I'm really excited to see what else we figure out along the way, but we've been at this for 18 years and it's always an iteration. We're always learning new things, trying out new interview questions, essay questions, and that is a whole science and an art in itself because those questions have been honed so carefully for each role over so many responses. Sometimes you think you have a good question and then you've read answers to it 50 times and you're like, I'm not getting value out of this question. We have to change it, right?
Exactly.
So we talked about the essay questions. What are some of the other types of questions we ask in the assessment that you think are really insightful?
Honestly, some of the multiple choice questions, right? So and those types of questions, yes, they're in there and it's just a kind of checks and balances. It's more about learning more about the thought process, right? It's are we proactively thinking about what's in front of us? So in those multiple choice questions, there is typically one strong answer that is right, But there can be some gray where others can be acceptable. But at the end of the day, it really just lets you understand, like, am I working with someone or am I talking to somebody who is more of a taskmaster? Or am I talking to somebody who is more of a proactive thinker and that has that type of mindset that's going to drive business, right?
I love that. So that kind of brings up the next thing I want to talk about, which is the difference between the manager level talent and the task level talent. There's this tipping point where you go from somebody who can, they're going to get the task done, to somebody who can build the system and be a leader in their role. So it's a leader versus follower line. As you're interviewing people, how are you identifying where somebody sits on that spectrum?
You know, it kind of comes down to how long have they been doing like the said activity. And then it comes down to how much leeway were they provided in their role to be able to make and execute decisions that would obviously still be in alignment with the leader that they're supporting. It's a very similar process where they come in, they learn how to anticipate those needs, what the goals of the team are, what the goals of the leader that they're supporting are, and then they're back there thinking about how can we execute this, and then they collaborate and then they run, versus somebody who there's a stop and go, like, what do you think about this idea? Having to wait for their boss's approval all the time. They might, the leader might let them fly, but they're going to be under relatively close supervision to make sure no mistakes are made. And that things are followed through with. And sometimes that doesn't always happen well, right? Like expectations are missed, or, you know, the thinking that's required for that higher level activity is missing. I don't think it's because they haven't thought about those things. I just think it's because they haven't been exposed to that type of environment where that was necessarily expected. And so sometimes I'm seeing where if you have a supervisor that is really hyper focused and maybe micromanaging versus a leader who sets expectations and lets that individual run with those clear expectations and then has check-ins, I tend to find that the more of the intense supervision of a leader really inhibits that person from being able to take the lead and jump into the role that they were hired for, or meet the expectations of being able to anticipate if they're not given that room to breathe. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think this is such a great point, because there's two sides to this, right? So you might have a leader who isn't able to let go, and their lack of leadership or their inability to like lead at a high level is stifling their employees' ability to really support them and grow. But it could also be that there's a lack of trust and there's a good reason for it. And that's what you're trying to uncover. Are they not moving into leadership in their role because they don't have the ability, the skill set, or the capacity? Or are they being kept at a lower capability or capacity because of the leadership that they're sitting under? And I think if you're a candidate listening to this and you're feeling frustrated, you feel like you're hitting your ceiling in your role, this is really something you need to look at. Are you demonstrating the ability? Are you building trust? Or are you stuck with a leader whose capacity is not big enough for where you want to go, and it's time for you to find a different environment? And if that's the case, you need to be really aware of that when you're interviewing, because they're putting you at a disadvantage when you're talking to someone like Erin, because Erin is going to listen for, were you being a leader in your role? Now, were you trying to be a leader and you weren't allowed to, or are you just not there yet? And I mean, that's what we're trying to uncover. And so you need to figure out how you're going to talk about that experience when you're in an interview situation. And you should also be aware, if you're hitting that ceiling and you've worked on that with your boss and you're not getting through that, and your ability is being stifled, it's time to go. So, I mean, it goes both ways, right? But from the leadership side, we also hear employers come to us and say, I'm so frustrated. I feel like they come to me for every task and it is the stop and go dynamic, and I want more. And it could be capacity, it could also be leadership. And so we have to look at both sides. Are you acting like a leader who allows people to serve you in that way? Or are you the problem?
Right.
Right. And so when you're talking to people who feel like the person they have in the role isn't reaching their full capacity, what are some of the questions or what are the conversations you have with that leader, that employer, to help kind of figure out where they are?
I ask, we talk about patterns, like, tell me about a time, right? Similar questions. I'm interviewing that employer to learn their behaviors. Like if they say, hey, I really need someone new because they're just not taking direction, and they, you know, they haven't built the trust that I need in order to be able to be trusted with these tasks. So in turn, I've noticed a ton of mistakes and all of these things, right? Like those are common things that I hear. And I have to peel the onion to figure out like, where is the problem? Because I'm not there. I can't see, right? I can't see what's going on in their day-to-day activities. So were there expectations that were clear? Or are these expectations in your mind and you're in fact creating a moving goalpost that is impossible for anyone to hit? Because if your expectations aren't clear and you're giving somebody a task and they're just running through it, but you have made no mention of to what the outcome that you expect to receive is, then you're likely going to be disappointed, right? Versus if you are micromanaging somebody that you have set free, so to speak, to run with that task or that initiative, but yet you're not allowing them to run free because you're asking them, how far are you, down that list, and tell me the intricate details of every decision that you made. You're really inhibiting them and their ability to use their problem solving skills to where if they run into a challenge, that's the appropriate time to come and meet with you and say, hey, these are the resources that I've used. These are the thoughts. And these are the solutions that I have come up with. But what would you like to see happen here? Right? There's different.
Yeah. And the reason this is so important is we don't want to help you repeat bad patterns that don't work for you.
Definitely not.
So, right. So we can help you. If your leadership isn't where it needs to be to help you get what you want out of your employee, we can help you with that. Or we can recognize that, okay, so this type of, you've hired people that are like this, they have this behavioral style profile or this education background, right? So we need to find you something different. So maybe you need someone who's less of a people pleaser and more of a pusher. And so these questions are so helpful. It may not, there's always two sides, right? It's our goal is to match people together whose skills and experience and everything align so they can support each other. But sometimes there are patterns that need to be broken or skills that need to be learned, or we just recognize that this person's been attracting a certain type of talent and they need a different type of talent. And that's our job, is to figure out, okay, what's this other kind of talent, and talk through, okay, so you need someone who's more driven and assertive and aggressive, maybe. That's what this is going to be like to manage this person. So you have those conversations too about, okay, so this behavioral style is going to challenge you. Are you ready for that? Do you want that? Are you okay with that? Because this, like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am style that you've been working with, or maybe they've been hiring a lot of young people who don't have a lot of life experience. And so you're just bowling them over and they're like, okay, I'll do whatever you want. But then they're not able to like fully wrap their arms around the role because they just don't have the life experience. The experience is going to be different managing somebody who is in their 40s and, has been around the block a little bit. So let's talk about what that's going to look like. Right. And we see people grow as leaders when they bring different types of people onto their team who are able to challenge them in different ways when they're open to that.
Right? Absolutely.
One of the other things that I love about our process is the series of questions we go through during the first video interview. So the questions from the book Who, and I'll put the description down below. But I love this way. We talked about patterns earlier, and I think this is one of the most interesting ways to learn about unrealized patterns. It's so interesting what people say as you go through these questions. So do you want to talk about the Who questions, or do you want me to go through them?
Yeah, you lead with that.
This is my favorite thing. Okay. So the way this process works is when you're doing your first interview with a candidate, you look at their resume, you go back to the last relevant role. So usually no more than 10 years. And then you ask the same series of questions. Why did you take this job? So so what you were listening for here is their motivation. So was it the culture? Was it that it was down the street? Like what was their thought process around why they took this job? Then you ask, what were you hired to do? So, but basically, what problem were you hired to solve? Which is another way I ask that question. And this is so much better than what did you do? What did you do is I sent emails and I answered the phone. What problem were you hired to solve? Is the department was in disarray, and because of my background organizing systems, they brought me in to solve XYZ problem. Okay, great. What did you accomplish in the role? And this is where things get really interesting. I'll never forget, I interviewed this person who kept taking transaction coordinator roles And every time I asked, what were you hired, it's a problem you were hired to solve, run the TC department, what accomplishment are you most proud of? It was in marketing. Every time, every single role, the thing that they were most proud of was marketing the company, developing marketing templates, something marketing related. And so it kind of clued me into, oh, they think that they want to do TC work. They think that's their skill set, but there's something else that they're really interested in. And they keep changing jobs because they're kind of missing this. And it was completely a total blind spot for them. So you'll listen
Right.
for this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then what is your biggest challenge? So this is where we get into that language of talent. Everybody's had a bad job and a bad boss, right? So one office where the biggest challenge was a boss that was really combative or an employee that was challenging to work with is fine. But if they talk about victim speak, if they're talking about things that were done to them or happened to them versus challenges that they overcame, I love it when we talk to a candidate and they say, oh, my biggest challenge was there was a natural disaster and we had to find a way to move XYZ. There was something that happened, a challenge, and their biggest issue was figuring out how to overcome it. And so that's what we're looking for. The language of talent is all about how they impacted change and not about what happened to them. So
Yes.
that's a really, really important one. And then the final one is, why did you leave? Were they pushed out or were they pulled forward? And again, there will be a job where they were laid off. Things happen, but the person who is talented was recruited away. Their boss left and brought them with them. They, a friend told them about this incredible opportunity where they'd get to do this next thing in their career. And so it was a purposeful move forward in their career. So
Mm-hmm.
we ask these questions for each job, and I try to ask them in slightly different ways because the candidate will start to predict what you're going to ask, and it
Yes.
can be a little goofy, but it's really important because those patterns matter, because what somebody says and what they do can be two different things. And again, there could be blind spots that they don't even know. Can you think of any times when you've gone through that process in an interview and had like a, oh, wow moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think even when it came down to like someone being laid off, like they're doing everything they can to like find another role. And at the end of the day, they might have a gap in a resume because of that. But what did they do with their time during that period? What did they take on? Did they accomplish any personal development, professional development? They work on any projects? And so when I see that situation, right? Or maybe the market shifted and real estate, that happens frequently, right? So you might have, the ability to support an assistant one day, and 2 months later that could unfortunately change, which it has over the past couple of years for a few. But what I notice is that the language of talent, they have found something that still helps them propel themselves forward, whether it's taking a course or investing their time and energy in a large scale project that, I mean, I had one individual who, yes, she has a license. Yes, she was supporting for such a long time. There just was not a job or a role for her in her area due to the market conditions. So she took it upon herself and partnered up and started procuring small flip properties. So during that time, what she recognized is that she never really understood, even though she'd been working in real estate, supporting others for 20 years, she never really understood the intricacies of all of the details and everything that was required to actually flip a property, have it be listed, and resold on the market. So in turn, it actually made her even better at her job, whether she's supporting a seller, the agent, investors, the clients of the organization, right? Because now she understands like a real life experience with that stress, like real life experience with those deadlines. It's not just another day or a number, right? She has that grit and she learned something that she can now apply moving forward. Because I feel like most agents that we work with, anyways, often help their clients bring their house to a certain level before it hits the market, whether it's something as simple as, paint or landscaping, to something even more complicated, like a full entire room or kitchen remodel, for example.
Yeah, how wonderful. What a great example of using something that was really a disadvantage. She was out of work, right? To her advantage. And then her ability to look at that and then articulate how that experience brings value to her next employer. And I think this is something else that you hear some candidates do such a good job of, is tying it all together. Don't just tell me what you did, tell me what you learned, and then tie that into how does that add value to the next person, and how does that fit in to what I want to do next, or what I'm trying to accomplish. And so this is some of that soul searching that I think candidates, you can tell the candidates who've done it, and you can tell the candidates who are just nervous and just need a job. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
heartbreaking, right? Because you want everybody to find a job that they love, but we really want to make sure that we're connecting our clients with somebody who is choosing that job purposefully. And so thinking through, how does this job fit into your bigger career goals? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to learn in this next job that you haven't had a chance to learn yet? That's important because, you know, whether employers like it or not, the only reason somebody comes to work for them is because it serves them, right?
Yes.
And then, so if the job doesn't fulfill your personal, professional, or financial goals, then it's not the right job for you.
Mhm.
And if you're really clear about what it is you need and want out of the next job, and what you want to accomplish, and what you're excited to learn, then we can do a better job of matching you with somebody who can help you achieve that. Right.
Absolutely.
Which
Yes.
brings, I want to talk about JCG+T
Mm.
and what the heck that means. Talk about what that framework means for you, and how you talk about it with clients.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, like most of the time, when I'm having this framework for clients, some people just come in and they're like, I just need somebody to do these 5 things, right? And then they start building out into, but I also need XYZ, right? And some of that's very soft skills, some of that is hard skills, and some of that is personality, and some of that is mindset. So we have to really hone in on what the core values of that business are and what that job entails, so that we understand who we're looking for. Are they a job fit? Do they have the skills and the experience necessary that we can reasonably believe, or through verifying references or activities, that they can perform those tasks, right? So that is usually the step one. That's what we're looking for. The culture fit is, tell me about your office and your environment. Do you have a mission, a value statement? And it's not just all about customer service. When I tell my favorite is when I ask clients, real estate agents or otherwise, tell me a little bit about your mission, your values in your business. What do you prioritize in way of your culture to bring it all together? And sometimes the first thing I hear is customer service. And while we know that's true, we have to dive a little bit deeper. I understand you're going to provide your clientele with the highest level of service possible, because that is the role that you've taken on to help them navigate the rocky road ahead that they might have, right? But within your own organization, are we talking about integrity? Are we talking about communication? Are we talking about, is it okay to make mistakes? Yes, it's okay to make mistakes, but this is how we need to handle mistakes. So laying out those expectations to create a cohesive environment is what I'm looking for, so that I understand what somebody might be walking into. And I also understand what you're trying to build, right? On the back end, you want to work with like-minded individuals. So I tend to get a lot of information up front about the culture and environment of the office, because I want to build that into the job ad. And I want to build that into the questions that I'm asking candidates to make sure we're all in alignment, so that it's not necessarily checking it off the box, but in a way it is. We're checking it off the box to make sure that, for example, I'm not going to put a very quiet, reserved individual in a very noisy, loud real estate office where, let's say, you're in more of a bullpen environment. Those are two conflicting types of personalities that would find that acceptable. So those are the types of things that we're trying to get to the bottom of in that instance.
Perfect. So we've talked about job fit, which is, do they have the skills, experience, trying to do the job? Do the hours work? Do the logistics of the job, like commute, do that type of thing? That's usually what people think about. That's that checklist of, do they match the job description? Then now we've talked about culture. So J is job fit, C is culture. Culture is values. What does it feel like to work here? What do we all believe in? What's the experience going to be like? Then we get into goals. How do you talk about goals with a client?
Sure. So I talk about goals. I ask them kind of like all the normal questions, right? Like, how many transactions are we closing? How do you measure your business? Is it in transaction count or sales volume? Because we want to be speaking the same language. But then we're looking at, like, what is the goal right now? What is it exactly right now that you need assistance with that would change your business and your life, giving you that time back, right? That we could find somebody else to handle for you who will love that activity. And so we're talking about the here and now. We're talking about, down the road, let's say a year, and we're talking about long-term goals. What are you trying to set yourself up for in the future? What are your goals? Do you want to be, are you okay a single agent team and that's where you would like to stay and that's what feels good to you? Or are you trying to build something out? And we really need to think about, okay, so how many assistants are you going to need and which one should we start with first, right? So we look at the goals of the business and the individual, right, to make sure that they have the tools that they need, not only by whether it's, through support of us and helping them find the people, through support of leadership coaching, for example, through you, giving them those tools, but helping them along the way, whether, with additional insights and exposing them to other things that they may not have been aware of.
Now, once we understand what the client's goals are, what the business goals are, then when we get into talking to an individual candidate, we can make sure that those align, right? So when we talk about JCG+T, the G for goals is the candidate's personal, professional, and financial goals. And what we've learned through looking at what placements haven't worked out in the past is when employees, pick a term. So when an employee's goals aren't being met, then they're going to self-select out and find another job. And this could look like somebody who wants to grow into an operations manager, but this team is going to stay a solo agent team. It could look like certain financial goals and the bonus structure or the way the compensation is structured is just never going to get them there. And it could be personal goals. One of my favorite stories about this is we had a candidate that we placed who was wonderful, but she was in graduate school. And on Wednesdays, she had to leave. Oops, losing my earpiece. She had to leave the office by 5 o'clock on Wednesdays to get to class. And the employer kept kind of pulling her back and not letting her leave on time. And graduate school was important to her. So she quit the job. And this was such a great reminder of how we have to really understand how this job fits into somebody's whole life and what are the constraints in their life to make sure that both sides can accommodate each other. And I mean, one of the things I love to talk about as a leadership coach is how, as an employer, you have the privilege of helping other people achieve their goals and move forward in their life while they're helping you. And it is a two-way street. And the better job you do of supporting your employees and helping them achieve their goals in all areas of their life in whatever way that you can, they show up so much more for you. So I like to talk about how when you understand somebody's personal goals, then you can make meaningful gifts. Remember, Jam, who used to work for us, wanted to learn Spanish. So I bought her a Duolingo subscription, right? Yeah. And that was not an expensive thing to do, but it was something that was really meaningful for her. We've done yoga classes for people who wanted to do that. Those kinds of things connect to the people who work for you beyond just the money. And I think as salespeople, it's easy to just think about the numbers. As salespeople, as business owners, it's all about hitting the next dollar. But not everybody is just motivated by money.
Right.
And so if you don't understand how this job fits into their whole life and the picture of what they're trying to achieve, you can really miss the mark by tying rewards to things that don't matter for people.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit earlier about talent. And talent is that sort of elusive, shiny thing that shows up when somebody is in alignment in so many different ways. What parts of our interview process do you think are most insightful or informative when it comes to figuring out if this person is the right kind of talent for this job and in this company?
Ooh, I think it all works together, honestly. Like, I may not have dug as necessarily deeply sometimes in a certain area if I did not see a particular answer in an assessment, right? That really just made my heart sing. Whatever that answer is, like the thought behind it, the how it was articulated, communicated, and presented, right? I may not have known that about their particular role in that situation. It might not have been something that they shared as, hey, this was my proudest accomplishment, or this was the problem that I was, hired to solve, right? The basics. So by seeing that information, then having that ability to have that conversation with them and uncover so many more details, not only about that situation, but everything else, you really do hear the language of talent start to shine through, because when you ask what a challenge was, like, what was that challenge? It'll very much come up, and it will also be something that they naturally say. And as a result, this was not working well for my team. So as a result, I made said change and improved it in the following ways, which resulted in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I love learning about people. I love learning about what makes them tick and what makes them excited to go to work every day, excited to accomplish things in front of them so that they can build the life they want too, right? So the more information people can share with me within reason, right? The better off you are. But it's also too about the way you present that information. That has been one challenge that I've noticed candidates at all levels have experienced lately, is how to present this information, all these wonderful things that they did, in a way that is concise and without rambling or being repetitive.
Yes, those communication skills are so key. And it's heartbreaking when you see someone who has amazing experience and background and they're presenting well, but then they won't stop talking. They don't know how to end a story. And you just know that there's no way that our client who wants things in bullet points is going to be able to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
So practicing interviewing is so important because I think in normal conversation, maybe they aren't quite as verbose, but in this scenario on camera, under pressure, they just don't know when to stop.
The nerves. Yep. The
The
nerves kick.
nerves, and it's heartbreaking. I
Natural.
think, yeah, some people do a great job and other people need to slow down. And then there are the people who just don't give you enough. There's both directions. There's the ones who you know that they have it in them, but they've been doing it for so long, it's so ingrained, they have a really hard time even telling you what they did on a daily
Mhm.
basis.
Yes, that's absolutely true. But if you think about it, I mean, an interview is really just about how well you know yourself, right? So if you
Yeah.
know yourself pretty well and you understand the roles, the challenges that you face before interviewing or before presenting, have a process for yourself, have a list of things that you've accomplished, and develop your stories to further help yourself continue to move forward and not be so taken back by, tell me a little bit about your top responsibilities in your role. And instead of saying, whoa, what are my top responsibilities? I literally do everything. You might
Not
have
helpful.
yeah,
Just
that's not gonna
not a
help.
helpful answer.
Not going to help me learn what you do exactly all day. And, by using other words such as, I do all this stuff and that admin stuff, that's not giving me any information that I need to decide if in fact you have the ability to navigate not only the client, but the role itself.
It is so hard because there's only so much we can do in our context and framework. This is work you need to do before you start interviewing with people.
Mhm.
There have been a couple times when you've seen a lot of potential in somebody and you've given them feedback and let them come back to interview again, but it's usually not possible, or it doesn't even work out in their favor at the end of the day because they didn't practice between interviews. I think having somebody interview you and recording it like we're doing here on Zoom and then watching yourself is also really valuable. I'll never forget when I was in an undergrad at USC, they had the MBA students interview the undergrads and it was videoed. And it was so cringy. It was so painful to watch. And one of the things I realized is I said like way too often as a Southern California girl, but I also did this limp wristy thing with my hands a lot and it looked so bad. And if I hadn't been forced to be interviewed like that, I would have gone out into the world walking around like this. So,
Oh,
so
no.
as uncomfortable as it might be, and I know not everybody likes to be on camera, having somebody interview you, even if you print off a list of questions and then you just watch it back, see how you answered, how long were your answers, how detailed, that kind of thing. And I think if you're somebody who doesn't know how to end a story, it's okay to pause and say, would you like me to elaborate more?
Exactly.
And then stop talking and let your interviewer say, no, I'd like more information, or no, I got it. Let's move on. Because there have been times for both of us, I think, where we've interviewed somebody and maybe we asked 3 questions in a half an hour.
Oh, yes.
And
Rough
you get out
interview.
of those. Yeah, you get out of this. Like, whoa, what just happened? These are all, I think, really important things to keep in mind so that both sides understand what we're looking for. Are you a job fit? Are you a culture fit? Are you a goal fit? Are you the right type of talent in this environment? And the way that we do that is by skill testing you in the beginning, seeing how you write, how you respond, looking for patterns through somebody's job and career progression and listening to how they talk about those things. And then one of my favorite parts of the process, and now I feel kind of old school because it's such an old school thing to do at this point, is we use the DISC assessment.
Yeah.
So, and I love the DISC assessment, but I think what's important, and I always like to tell people, it's not really about the assessment. Like
No.
we use the DISC because it's sort of tried and true and it's a good snapshot, but you could use the big five. There are other assessments. I think what's so important is that you use an assessment that is validated for hiring so that you're
Mhm.
not using something that has bias in it. We're not going to get into what DIS and C mean here, but let's talk about how you coach a employer to use the DISC to have that behavioral style interview conversation and to uncover how they're likely to behave at work.
Right. That is the magical question. So I come across a lot of agents that obviously have a lot of experience with the disc. And then I have agents that just, it hasn't been something that they've embraced or they know what it is, but they have never really fully utilized it. First of all, if you're going to assess somebody in this capacity, it is always best practice to validate that information with them, because what you're looking at should only be 20, maybe 30% of your total hiring decision. And at the end of the day, it is an assessment. It is not fact. So what you would need to do, just like you should with anything else, right, is fact check. So having that conversation and validating the disc with the candidate generates a lot more authentic questions, a lot more authentic answers to real life scenarios than tell me how you managed 30 transactions a month, right? It's going to give you a little bit more of a deeper dive into the insight of, if their assessment says this person has a difficult time accepting criticism, we're going to learn, is that true? Or have they matured and they've grown enough to understand that, no, this is one of the favorite parts about working with someone, because they are getting feedback so they know where to go next. They know how to improve. They know when they're missing the mark, or they know when they're doing it just right.
Yeah. And so without getting into how we validate a disc on this conversation, we basically take the summary and we go through it line by line and we use it as a jumping off point for a conversation. So it takes you down little rabbit holes. One of my favorite examples, I was interviewing a candidate from the Philippines, and it said something about how they like to stand back and, they don't volunteer their opinion. And in our environment, especially at that time when our team was larger, especially the American team, I mean, we're all just like boom, 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 like really like in it with opinions, debating things. And so we want to know what you think. Everybody's opinion, everybody's knowledge and experience matters. So it was such a great point to say, okay, in this environment, you got to like get in there and we want your opinion, and we may debate with it, but we want it. So what do I need to do to make sure you feel safe so that you will speak up? So that's
Yeah.
why I asked that question, and it was so insightful because what I learned was they needed to kind of know about the topic in advance so that they could form their opinion about it and then come to the meeting prepared. But being put on the spot was really difficult for them. And so this was a great learning lesson for me as a leader, because like Erin, you and I will just boom or like go at it. And God help the church mouse who's trying to get a word in the conversation. And so I learned if there was something we needed to talk about a process that we wanted to change or a challenge with a client, I would put it in the agenda, and then people could come to the meeting prepared to talk about it. And that created space for people like this employee to come with their really good, valuable ideas and insight, because that's important. I want everybody's insight. So this is why the disc is so valuable. If you don't understand how people are likely to behave, you may assume that they're going to be like you, like I was in that situation, or you might end up frustrated because you don't think somebody's showing up the way you need them to, but you don't understand them. And I also use my husband as a great example when it comes to the disc. I had him take the disc when we were first dating. So this was almost 20 years ago. And my husband is a very, very high D and a very, very high C. So he has no like interpersonal soft feely skills. He's an executive chef. He's like an Italian Gordon Ramsay, like rah. And so he needs everything to be fast and he needs everything to be accurate. And so if you tell him a light bulb is out and it's a Saturday night at 8 o'clock at night, he will get off the sofa and go change the light bulb because it might as well be done right now. And then we'll both be annoyed because you didn't need to do it right now. So understanding how people are going to behave helps you kind of forgive things about them that might otherwise frustrate you, and it helps you navigate conversations with them. So this is so helpful. I find the disc is so helpful in all areas of our life. It's something that once you understand what it all means, you can recognize trends in clients, so you can shift how you talk. Do they need a lot of information? Do they need, how's your day? How's it going? Warm and fuzzy. And the same thing happens with your employees. So the more you understand about them, the better you can communicate with them, and vice versa. I mean, we have clients who will share their disc with their final candidate and talk about, okay, this is how I show up. Like, I send 2-word emails, and it doesn't mean I'm mad at you, right?
Like,
I want bullet points. Do not give me a story, right? And once people understand that, then they can work in that context. Otherwise, somebody's feelings end up getting hurt because they're only getting 2-word emails, right? It was just a lack of understanding about how people behave and communicate.
exactly.
So that is a really valuable piece of the process, I think. And the other piece that I think you get probably the most pushback on, or the piece that most people want to just skip over, is day in the life, right?
Yes.
So talk about what the heck is a day in the life interview and why is it so important?
Oh my gosh. In my opinion, this is critical. At this point, you've had so many conversations with this candidate. By this point, we have references, we're confirming what we believe. But at this point, it's the show me stage. So you absolutely need to get in there and test what you expect, whether it's in person or even if this person is in a remote setting, you need to test what you expect. So by providing, a structured, maybe 2-hour time frame, if it's an in-person exercise, and you're going to be available, you're not going to be hovering, but you're going to be available. And you're going to keep in mind that you have not trained them on a single thing to do with your business, right? So with that thought in mind, you're assigning them some tasks to complete, and you're there for questions, concerns, filling in any blanks if necessary. But what you're watching for is, how are they coming to the conclusion or completing these tasks? Did you leave information out? Are they resourceful? Did they ask really good questions? And what's the end result? What's that deliverable? You are not expecting perfection at this point, but what you are looking for is some areas that will help you learn how to help them be trained in the role. Any area where they might need to be leveled up to what your expectations are. And in addition, you're also seeing how they respond to feedback that they may not want to hear all the time, right? You're going to give them both that positive and the constructive. And if you're noticing that they are not responding to you in a very in a normal way, right? They're prickly, or something about the temperature in the room changes. Those are things that are not going to change over time. It's only going to get worse. And it should be a very solid red flag for you to stop what you're doing and take a couple steps back and continue to move forward. To me, that is, I think, before you present an offer to anybody, it's such a shame to start working with somebody and a week into the role, you're recognizing right away that they said, hey, I can create this flyer. Hey, I can manage this transaction. I've got your calendar, under wraps, like here's what's going on, but you're noticing those results are not there. They're saying what they're doing. So you need to make sure you're speaking the same language. When I say, hey, have this listing presentation prepared for me, what does that mean? Right? Does that mean the CMA is in there that I did it myself? Are you providing that to me? Is there any other, are there any special details about this neighborhood that we should include? And it's kind of putting that all together to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that they have the skills, or they can learn the skills that it will take to succeed. And also too, that you can manage them correctly.
Yes. So we've seen this where the way somebody communicates and the way somebody receives information don't match.
So opposite. Yes.
Like they just don't match. And they're both good people, smart, capable people, but these two people do not speak the same language. No. The other thing is, somebody worked for hotshot agent down the street. Therefore, they must already know how to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So we don't need to test for that. And then they get into the office. It turns out, no, they don't know how to do it, or they don't have any idea how to do it at the level or the detail or whatever that you need it. So even if it seems obvious to you, you still should test on it. So if they're going to be managing transactions, you need to give them an assessment that is around like how you expect them to manage transactions, like writing up a contract, filling out a form, adding it to the MLS, whatever it is, auditing your checklist.
Right.
Because even if they do it right, the way they do it, the questions they ask, how they present the information, how long it takes is all information that you need, even if it turns out they actually can do that task really well. It's not just about the task. That's the beauty of this whole thing. The other thing that I like about this, especially if they're going to be in office, is they get to sit in the environment and actually feel what it's like in there. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can all relate to ending up in a position where it just wasn't the right environment. I remember this one candidate, they were going to be sitting back to back with their employer. And that proximity and being back to back was like triggering for them. And they realized that in the skill assessment interview, because the agent was back there making phone calls, loudly talking on the phone. And this is somebody who needed quiet space.
Yes.
And she realized, like, this is not the right environment for me. I cannot sit here 8 hours a day with him, yelling at people on the phone. Or maybe there's somebody who needs a lot of energy and like people around them, but they were going to be sitting in some back closet office all by themselves in the dark. And that wasn't the right fit. Or maybe I remember once we had a candidate who was just loud, like the way they moved and like wiggled and chewed and breathed. Everything about them was just, there was like a lot of noise. And this was an agent who needed a lot of quiet. And she's like, oh my gosh, I just spent 3 hours with this person. They're so skilled. They check all the boxes, but I don't think I can sit next to them, for all this time. This isn't the right, it doesn't feel right. So that helps. And then also it's those other interviews. So if at all possible, we want this person to meet some of their coworkers or meet the office manager or have a side interview with the coach, somebody else with the agent or the employer out of the room, out of earshot, so that they can get the full picture. And we have some agents, some clients who are so good about this. They're like, you guys just tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly, like just lay it all out there. And, other people are a little more circumspect about that. But I think when people know what they're stepping into, they can opt in. And, we know nothing is going to be perfect. There might be an environment that's really stressful. It's growing really quickly. They work with really, high-end clients, and you're dealing with business managers and things get kind of messy and complicated, whatever. When people know that and they're prepared before they come in, then they can roll with it versus just talking to the agent, not getting to meet anybody else, sort of interviewing within a silo and then being thrown into something that they weren't mentally prepared for. That's where we have problems. That's where things start to go around. Yes. So I know that you've had to really slow people down, and which I love. I love that sometimes somebody is so excited about a candidate. They're like, done. I saw your interview with them. I'm ready to hire them. Let's go. And you have to say, no, we're going to slow this down just a little bit. We're going to check some boxes. And the other box that is so critical is reference checking. Can you think of a time when reference checking really made an impact, either for good or for bad, for a candidate's sake?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think, references that really speak to specifics, right? If those employers are saying, this is specifically how this person really went the extra mile and was able to support me and really knocked my socks off. I get that not every reference is going to be like that. But if you're having references, where at this point, you're really confirming what you believe. That's what the reference is, right? You're making sure that everything still feels consistent and the pattern is positive. So if you're getting positive references back, it's a very good sign. But if you're starting to get inconsistent references, right, where one person says, hey, wonderful experience with this individual, next person says, not the greatest experience. This is why, this is what happened. This is where the fail was within our unit, right? Or our little group that we were working within. It can really lead to other questions and either provide a lot of reassurance or some skepticism. So those are things that obviously, if there's skepticism, have to be worked through differently. But I really love checking references on candidates directly, simply because speaking to those employers about, after I've met with this candidate, learned so much about them. Obviously at this point, I'm rooting for everyone, but I've really grown fond of this person. So it's really so amazing to hear what others have to say about their experience with the same person. And, obviously our clients really appreciate that too, because if there was ever any sort of maybe something didn't feel clear, but they had a really strong feeling, the good vibes necessarily that they need. And this can really help them feel very confident about making the decision to move forward with this person.
Yeah, definitely. And also when it comes to knowing how to train somebody or how to support them, I mean, references, it's not just about trying to find the bad things.
No.
While we do want to know if there are any red flags, we also want to know how do we help this person succeed? How do we win with them? And that's really helpful. But you said something that I want to hone in on, which is, you know, confirming how we feel. Like there's this feeling. It's just like in any relationship. Tell me how you respond when somebody says, I know they check all the boxes, but I don't know. Like in my gut, I can't tell why it's not feeling right.
Sure. It's funny. So I have had this situation several times. And, so we start going through like, what is the emotion? First of all, what is the emotion? Are we like scared? Are we nervous? What is the emotion that we're feeling? Maybe for them, this is maybe the largest hire they've made, and it's the most amount of money that they've paid, right? So we want to be really, really sure in our, as a natural human being, you want to be really sure and confident about your decision. You're not willing to risk that. So we kind of have to dial back into reviewing the information, and then talking about their personal experience with that person. And maybe if there was something like a tipping point where they can identify where it was that they started to feel a little bit less clear, and then really hone in on what that is. And obviously, if we need to have additional conversations with candidates or do, a little bit more experience-based testing with that individual, then that's what needs to be done, because you really do want to rule them in or rule them out. You don't want to just let it hang, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting. We have clients they really fall on a spectrum. You have those who are just like really afraid to hire, like afraid to make a decision. And so it's hard to get them to move forward. And then you have the people who just love everyone.
Oh,
And you have to really, those are the ones you have to pull back and say, wait, we need to actually like check all the boxes and really make sure, because you just like everybody. That's great. But sometimes, even if they're in the middle, they can't put their finger on it, but it doesn't feel right. And sometimes that means it's not right. And that's it. But I love how you kind of help them identify what the emotion is. Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Or is it like a gut feel that this isn't the right person? Like there's something there, like you said, there's a tipping point where you feel like, I don't think they're being honest, or I feel like we're lacking transparency, or that there's a misalignment here. Because through this whole process, it's not just checking boxes. Are we still in alignment? Are we still in alignment? Still in alignment.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Which also brings to the very last piece. So now you've got people kicking and screaming, ready to like get going together. And you're like, wait, we've got one more conversation to have, which is the alignment conversation.
Yes.
And this is another one of those pieces where it doesn't have to be in person. It can be over the phone or on Zoom, but checking all of the boxes and making sure that we haven't missed anything before the offer goes out is so key. The other thing I love about this conversation is because these people are all excited. Like we're in the last stretch of this whole thing. But we want to make sure, hey, 2 weeks ago when we started this conversation, you said you were comfortable with the commute and that you would be able to be on time at 9 a.m. You've done this drive a couple of times. I just want to reiterate, like 9 a.m. means 9 a.m. every day. Are we still on board with that? And it's going to seem kind of silly at that point, having that conversation, but a month later, when they're late, it's a lot easier to say, hey, do you remember during our alignment conversation when I talked about how important it was that we're on time every day? You've been late twice in the last month. So we need to talk about it. What are you going to do differently to make sure that you're on time? It's so much easier. Things like dress code, any of your standards and expectations. So as you're getting people ready for this conversation, I know you talked to them about, so think about what's important to you? What are your standards and expectations? How do you want people to show up for you? And how are you prepared to show up for them? And I think having that in this part of the conversation makes such a big difference, because when things go wrong in the future, if they do, then it's so much easier to say, hey, we talked about dress code before you started. We talked about how we don't wear flip-flops, whatever. And hey, you're in flip-flops. What's going on? Versus, hey, by the way, I know I never mentioned that we don't wear flip-flops, but now you're wearing flip-flops and I don't like it. It's really awkward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think most people would rather know in advance what is expected of them than to, again, that moving goalpost, like, surprise, this is what we're doing today. this is how I feel about this situation.
Right. And I think you do such a good job of coaching people to help them think about this, because especially if this is their first hire, they don't know necessarily what are my standards. Like, I want you to show up and do your job. But beyond that, I don't necessarily know what they are. But we have enough experience to say, hey, maybe you should talk about transparency, honesty, the way, if you're going to be late, how you want to handle that, whatever the thing is, time off, that kind of stuff. So you have those conversations with people so that they can talk about their standards and expectations in that call. But the other piece of this that is so key, especially for somebody who is quitting their job to come and work for you, is, hey, these are my expectations, and this is how I'm going to set you up for success. And I think this is such a beautiful conversation to have, which is, okay, what success looks like in 90 days is you've accomplished X, Y, and Z. So let's talk about what training I need to give you, what resources I need to provide so that you can accomplish that. And then it's a conversation. Okay, so we're going to map out on the calendar. 2 weeks in, we're going to do a training, or I'm going to introduce you to Bob and he's going to teach you how to do whatever. And then we're going to check in 30 days. We're going to check in every 30 days and we're going to see where we are. Like, where are we ahead? Where are we not? You just have to think about it from a candidate standpoint. They want a new job. They're excited to work for you, but they have a job. So how are they confident walking into that boss's office and giving notice? And then if they're a great candidate, there's a chance that boss is going to counter them. And this happens. Somebody tries to quit and they say, oh, well, I'll match that salary. Please stay. It's a whole nother thing we can talk about how that's not an idea. If you decided you're going to leave, don't let them buy you back, because they'll be looking to replace you because they know you have one foot out the door. Not good.
Quickly, yeah.
But if you're the new employer, you want to make sure that you've really cemented this relationship, which means you need to understand what their financial goals are, talk about, what the pay is going to be and how they're going to reach their bonus, if there's a bonus structure, right? And you're going to talk about what success looks like and how you're going to set them up for success, right?
Absolutely.
And then writing the offer is just icing on the cake. It's just a little cherry on top. It's easy. There's no stress about it. There's much less back and forth. Sometimes they're going to have a counter.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes we have clients who really want to, get a discount for those first 90 days or something. And there's a little bit of misexpectation about what the starting salary is going to be. But usually, if they really follow the process and they follow your advice through the process, getting that offer signed is pretty easy.
Oh, yeah. Very.
Yeah.
There's no other question. There's no other reservations. Everybody is happy to move forward.
And there's clarity, right? It's all very clear, because at every stage, we've talked about all the things that are important, not just the job duties and the salary, but all of the other bits that are going to help these two people line up and be successful. So what I love about having the chance to do this with you for so many years, it's been like 7 years that we've been doing this process together, right? And I did it even before you came on board and we've refined it together, is when people follow the process, placements stick.
Yes.
It's just 100%. That simple. 100%.
Unless
there's going to be the odd
of like life moving because of a family or something occurring, like a major life event, right?
Yeah.
People absolutely.
We can't predict the future. But in terms of missed alignment, when we get job fit, culture fit, goal fit, and talent, we've set clear expectations and we've created a clear roadmap for how this person is going to be onboarded. It works. People stay, they're happy, they grow, and we get to help them hire the assistant that supports that assistant, or help them go into operations manager. And we just get to see, it's so fun to see, we have clients that we've worked with for over 10 years, 15 years, and we've seen these people grow in these positions and continue to flourish because they follow the process and they do their parts. And I don't know, it's fun. I love what we do.
Me too. So much fun. It's really fun to bring people together in this way.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Erin, I'm so glad we had a chance to hop on and just talk about what we do. I'm going to break this up into little bits, so it's little bite-sized pieces, but I'll probably post the majority of this as one full conversation too. So we'll see how that all goes when I edit it. But thank you. I'll let you get back to interviewing candidates.
Thank you. Yes, I have an interview here in just a few minutes.
I could tell your eyes were getting big. All right, bye.